Wow, what a bunch of boring bullshit this was. Like, unbelievable. I spent the last like couple of weeks like taking, time out of my day to read a couple of pages of this at a time, sometimes like a couple of hundred pages at a time. Finally got through it after, I was on the about like four-fifths of the way through, and I'm just like, okay, let's just get this out of the way so I can move on to something else. Because that was kind of my mindset, reading this is that like, well, if I stop reading it and move on to something I like more, I'm never going to come back to this, and I'm never ever going to, have like a solid, full understanding of like my views of what I feel about this book. That's kind of my mindset because I think over the past like 5 years or so, I've been so busy. I've been like getting into this habit where I just drop books if I don't enjoy them. And at the time, it made sense, but like now it's sort of like, okay, you don't have a full understanding of the text. You don't know everything that happens. You're kind of jumping the gun too soon. Okay. Like I'm sure there have been times where like I've dropped books that I probably should have pushed through, but there's also times where I feel like, yeah, I could have stopped reading it and lost and missed out on absolutely nothing. That's kind of how I feel with like the Blade itself, which is this book that's been sitting on my shelf for quite a long time. I want to say like 5 years. I bought this on Amazon, never got around to reading it. So I finally realized that like, wait, I have this book sitting around. I really need to get around to it. So I got it out. I started reading it, and yeah, there's a reason that whatever I see, let's see, New York Times best-selling author on a book cover, I like instantly throw it in the trash because like I don't think I've read a book in the past several years that has that label and is actually worth a shit. That's my genuine understanding of like that the New York Times editorial piece is that like it's just it's just it's just a personal picks list from the editors at the New York Times. So they don't know anything about the publishing industry. They don't know where the real talent is. They don't know like how to evaluate books or talk about them or like are really interested in pushing anyone outside of like this very narrow scope of people and personalities, right? I've talked about this for a long time. The New York Times best-selling authors being a New York Times bestselling author doesn't mean anything, okay? It doesn't even really mean you're a bestseller. But with that being said, not only is it a New York Times bestseller, it's also has it ringing endorsements by such great talents like George R. Martin. I don't know if you can make that out. And Felicia Day. Two people that I know are complete scum who have never been involved with anything of value whatsoever, who have just been like this major blemish in like the world of entertainment that we really need to just kind of excise and kind of just rid ourselves. We gotta purge this antitoxin from our bodies. Like we need to acknowledge this. George R. R. Martin sucks. Yeah, always has, always will. Like, not only was A Song of Ice and Fire not very good to begin with, like, it's not even going to get finished. So, yeah, don't care about George. Nothing he says or does is in any way any kind of ringing endorsement. He's scum, right? And reading this, I kind of wondered, like, man, A Song of Ice and Fire is better than this. Maybe that's why George recommended this because it makes him look better in comparison. Like, what does George do in A Song of Ice and Fire? What does he do? Like, for the first 200 pages, he establishes the core cast of characters. He establishes like the setting and the lore and like the tone. Like he sets up like all these issues. That'll carry over into subsequent books, right? He does that thing that a lot of TV writers do, where they make like that initial like setup really interesting and fascinating with all these multi-layered just kind of like angles it could go, and then just slowly just become more and more contrived and ridiculous, because he doesn't write a story, he writes a hook to like kind of bait you in, right? You know, even within like the first 200 chapters, 200 pages, the 200 pages of like the first A Song of Ice and Fire novel, Game of Thrones, like you can see him doing that, of him like manipulating you into thinking this is gonna be this really convoluted, complex political drama, and it's just not. Okay, it just isn't. Right? And like when I think of that, you know, when I think of this book, it's like, yeah, it's like a lesser version of that. You know, in that sense where like you get all these characters, you get all these backgrounds, you get all these descriptions of like, oh, he's the Bloody Nine, the most feared man of the North. You know, he's going to meet the wizard, and they're gonna go to the city, and they're gonna like do something like again, it's a lot like that in that sense, where you get like a lot of vague just assertions of like, oh, the Union is becoming corrupt, ooh, the nobility isn't competent, like, ooh, like they do all this stuff, right? The author, he does all this stuff where he just comes up here, like, comes out, like, puts out all these characters and, like, just basically stitches together a bunch of scenes, like, involving them. Like, a lot of which, like, don't tie together very well, that don't really explain a lot, that don't really, like, lead into anything interesting. And it's very, very unsubtle, too. Because I'm sure that's going to be something that a lot of people bring up, you know, seeing this video is like, oh, you didn't understand it. But, like, no, I understood it just fine. Like, if anything, I think it was trying to be subtle, but just wasn't, you know? Like, he does this thing where, like, he tries to, like, get across, like, how he wants you to see the characters, right? So, like, you have that, you have Jezal Luthar, like, the guy who's training to win the contest, you know? He's very arrogant and full of himself, so, like, all of his dialogue and all of his introspections and all of his like observations about other people like have to revolve around that concept, right? They have to, like, he can't have any humanity or like, you know, come off like an actual person. Like, oh no, he's selfish and self-centered, and so he's like that all the time with no real redeeming qualities whatsoever. Right? It's kind of try-hardish in that way, where it's trying to get across to you like the significance of what's happening, the importance of what's going on, you know, this idea that, like, you know, the Union is in decay, you know, and it just doesn't work, you know. Like, 500 pages of this book, and it's basically just everyone meeting up in a city and then deciding to go to another city, right? Like, it's like a setup to a fantasy novel. You know that, you know, like Lord of the Rings, how it starts in the Shire, and then you like meet all the characters, get a view for the culture there, and then like it sets up Frodo's desire to leave and go on an adventure and like to sort of destroy the ring. Like, you know, it's like this book is the opening chapters of Lord of the Rings, where they're all just like, okay, time to go out on an adventure to the edge of the world. And I'm just like, you know, when I get to that point, I'm just like, why would I care? And that's my feeling, like, reading this book and like observing all these characters, you know, thinking about them, picking up on the little quirks, their little interactions, you know, like their character dynamics, you know, where the author is going with them. It's like I think about like basically all of them, and I come away with like this really sinking, like deep feeling. I think the worst feeling you can ever have when it comes to reading a book. And it's just like, why should I care? You know, because I don't care about the Union. I don't care about like the deep dark past of like the history. Like characters do things that are supposed to be like try-hardish and edgy and dark, and they just come off as like kind of forced. Like the Inquisitor guy, Galaka, he steals like this ancient historical text from like this old like historian guy, the Abdecti, and it all comes off as like pointless and mean spirited and just like trying to act as if like, oh, like people don't care about history, except we do. Like this idea that like all the entire culture and history of this city would have like just decayed into irrelevancy over that span of time is just absurd to me. This idea that like literally nobody cares about like what's going on or like the history of some of these people. It just comes off as like really, really extremely forced. Like it just doesn't come off like natural at all. Like that's the thing you feel when you read this and like see like Jessel's interactions with like this girl he has a thing for, and like his friendship with her brother and stuff like that. Like it all, and like his feelings on the matter. Like it all just comes off as really forced and unnatural, even though that like it all should make perfect sense. Like to me it feels like there are so many characters in this that don't really contribute anything to the plot in any meaningful capacity, right? There's a lot of characters in it that you could like cut out entirely and like just use that time to like flesh out the other characters more. Like I don't understand why like Pharaoh was introduced. I don't understand like why we're like jumping all over the map sometimes when like the core plot should be in like establishing the setting and stuff like that. Like I don't like a lot of the decisions made, and especially the fact that like really at its core nothing happens in this entire book. Like what exactly happens other than like the fellowship forming and them going out to do something, like there it's just, why exactly would I care? Like I do have like the other two books in the trilogy as well, but like my deep like belief when it comes to this kind of thing is that like really real talk, like you shouldn't have to wait for a sequel to like figure out like why you should be invested. Like yeah, the characters should have been more interesting. There should have been way more going on. There should have been more like political intrigue. There should have been more of a setup of like the war and like the state of culture and stuff like that. It's all just like it's just not like fleshed out enough to be interesting. It's almost there. You can see like the skeleton of something that could be good or interesting or like might turn out to be worthwhile, but like it's just not there. And when you think about it in that capacity, when you read this book, like you have to wonder like why would I even bother? Outside of being a YouTuber who talks about this kind of thing all the time, like why would I bother reading this slop?